this omni-channel success story that you guys helped to write there at Sears Holdings. Can you take it away, please?
Absolutely, Mike. I appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to talk about, really, I think, one of the most important topics facing supply chain today. What's very clear is the retail world is changing very quickly. There's a quote on this page from the Harvard Business Review about how business in 2011 was fundamentally different than it was 30 years ago. I would submit that it's fundamentally different today than it was 3 years ago. The level of complexity that we're dealing with, the shortened planning cycles, and then really the competitive dynamics of disruptive influences like Uber, Shopping Express, maybe even Alibaba when they come into the market, change how you need to plan your competitive differentiation strategies as a retailer. And certainly, as a supply chain, we have a lot different considerations than we did in 2012, and our footing is sort of less secure as we plan where do we want to put our resources, where do we want to invest. I went back and actually Googled, key supply chain trends in 2012, and not a lot of mention about omnichannel. A little bit of mention about big data. So really, our footing is less secure in that, how we want to plan and what we want to do. It's less clear. How valuable is same day going to be? How valuable are some of these things that are taking place in the omnichannel going to be for me as a retailer and for my customers? The fact is, we're living in an omnichannel world today. I'm not the first person to say this, but I want to be very clear that omnichannel is not a sub-strategy of retail. It's not an alternative type of retail. It is retail today, and it's retail that has been enabled by technology, by big data, and by mobile technology. In fact, it's really changed the way the customers interact with retail. You now have a digitally enabled customer that is empowered, that has information at their fingertips that they did not have just a few years ago. In fact, they literally customers have the mall in their hands. You can shop using finger strokes rather than footsteps. That is a tremendous paradigm shift. If you think about pricing information and price comparison, rather than being informed by the circular on the weekend or what you believe about what a retailer stands for from a pricing standpoint, you can actually sort of commoditize that purchase, whether it's a big screen TV or a piece of apparel, to I understand the pricing that I'm going to get from this retailer and from that retailer. That really changes how you compete in the marketplace. In fact, transparency of information has somewhat commoditized the retailers to a certain extent in what their brands stand for. So now we're really faced as retailers with some really important questions that in this digitally enabled, customer-empowered, omni-channel world, how do we want to differentiate? Can we differentiate ourselves based on this omni-channel experience that's seamless across the store and online and other channels? Are we going to compete on price? Are we going to compete on the complementary service offerings? Are we going to compete by having the best assortment, or are we going to compete on having a curated assortment that the customers can reliably come to us because we have the best of the best in whatever category that is? Or are we going to compete on our fulfillment solutions by being in the right locations or having the right fulfillment options? Or it could be all of the above, but certainly reframing this question is in front of all of us as retailers and supply chain professionals. I do think that from an omni-channel perspective, those of us that start with a brick and mortar starting point really are sort of advantaged because we can play an omni-channel in a way that the pure play retailers can't. The pure play retailers can compete a little better on endless aisle and a little better from a scale perspective. Think about Amazon, but the store is really the ultimate same day to day. Walk in the store, pick it up, particularly if I have visibility to that inventory ahead of time through my smartphone or through my PC. There's a visceral experience, and it can be digitally enhanced. You can, through QR codes and other technology or geofencing, enhance that in-store shopping experience with technology. But the lines are being blurred by different integrators coming in. Am I going to shop your store through eBay Now, Google Express, or through the Sears interface online? Can crowdsourcing technologies like Uber change the way that fulfillment happens, and how do I engage with that fulfillment experience? So one of the keys for all of us is how do we connect the dots from a customer experience standpoint? And truly, I believe that how you define the strategy has to start and end with the customer. And then you build back, what is my point of sale experience? What's the loyalty program that I want? What's the site experience that I want to have? What are the promises that I want to make from a fulfillment standpoint? When I put all that together, that has to start from the customer. And in fact, supply chains are continuing to move closer to the customer. And as we start in this rapidly changing environment where our footing is less secure about where we want to put our investments, it's really critical to start with that customer and connect the dots in the way that makes sense for you as the retailer.
You know, as you think about your omni-channel strategy, or as companies go through this process, one thing that's important is obviously to lay out the capabilities that you want to operationalize to support omni-channel interaction and interfaces with your customer base in the supply chain. What you see here is an ARC survey that talks about some of the capabilities that respondents currently support. Obviously, we looked at this data, we looked at other data as we built out our roadmap to add capability to extend that experience and really personalize the fulfillment experience that our customers see, both in online interaction and obviously their experience at the store, both as a pickup point and obviously as a place to shop traditionally as well. When you think about the mission of Sears, I'll really focus on the last line. When you talk about our members shopping their way, our mission is very much tied to this notion that customers really have different and evolving ways in which they expect to interface with people who provide them with products and services. And so core to our mission statement was this notion that we would give our members flexibility, provide it a very easy interface for them to engage with us, and as we gain more insight about these members and their shopping patterns, make sure that our offerings continue to evolve and continue to be tailored to what they're looking for. Some of the network pressures we had, this is a 2011 view. You can see when we compare us to Amazon, we had some pretty interesting challenges when you think about the cycle time that our network offered. The map on the left-hand side talks about our network in 2011, and it was very much tied to a Chicago-based online model with 2 fulfillment centers here in the Chicagoland area, compared to a strategy that Amazon had at the time, which was a little bit more diverse in terms of the nodes they had in their supply chain. So, you know, as Jeff talked about, the brick-and-mortar retailer's advantage is that, 90% of commerce today globally still goes through some sort of traditional retail outlet. And I think the key really is to lean into and embrace the power of that footprint and the proximity to your customers, and be able to scale a solution which, Mike talked about in the introduction was very quick for Sears to pilot, test, learn, and then deploy across the network very successfully. So we employed ship from store initially early on, and that was a very low investment option for us to take that inventory investment that we had already made in the store in close proximity to our customers, leverage that inventory as well as our store-facing inventory to fulfill online orders to customers. Obviously, that's going to be the most cost-effective way to do this in terms of infrastructure, but it also has the added advantage of leveraging that inventory investment. And as everyone knows in traditional retail, that inventory at the store and what you do with markdowns and obsolescence at the store at the end of the season is really one of the biggest challenges that most retailers have in profitability. So we're now able to see that inventory and use that across a much broader customer base to fulfill those customer needs as they want to see it. The other interesting part of the solution that we deployed was stores can be added to this network dynamically. As you have seasonal business needs, as that period from Black Friday through Cyber Monday through the Christmas season comes, we're able to add stores, if you will, to this network to be able to add fulfillment capability and capacity, but also add proximity to customers to further reduce that cycle time to delivery. As we design the network, and everyone has this challenge, that tipping point and that balance between the number of locations you have, and obviously the cycle time and the logistics cost that you're afforded with that model. That's a balance that we've done in partnership with UPS. It's also something that we've done just very dynamically, looking at the network and looking very strategically at the store-facing DCs that we turn on in this program, and also the stores that we turn on in this program, to make sure that we have coverage that's appropriate relative to our customer mix across the U.S. It's important when you think about omni-channel to realize that this is not just a supply chain thing. It really involves everyone across the organization. And I think one of the critical success factors that Jeff and the team deployed early on was the establishment of cross-functional teams, cross-functional accountability, leveraging not just our team and supply chain, also the store operations team, our online business unit, as well as resources in marketing, merchandising, and IT, to make a very coordinated effort here to bring this to bear in a very short amount of time. The key to change management many times is in the way you incent. One of the things in a traditional store model is the store typically gets credit for sales that originate in the store. You find that if we were going to have online orders that originated in the store, or if we were going to have this cheetah fulfillment that we call our store fulfillment network, the store was going to spend the money on the labor. The store really needed to get credit for the sale. And I can't underscore enough the importance of aligning your incentives with the behavior you want to see in the supply chain as a way to drive adoption and make sure that everyone's on board to achieve the mission of ultimately satisfying the customer. So what did this look like? If you think about Sears and Kmart, we've got kind of a before and after network view. And as Mike mentioned, being able to service 81% of the population with a one-day transit and be able to further refine that mission, adding stores and adding store-facing DCs to this fulfillment mix. We also worked very closely with UPS to integrate their pickup times with obviously the store pick schedule or our store replenishment pick schedule, to make sure that we took full advantage of the cycle time advantage that proximity gave us in those markets. Another critical element of this was to improve your ability to drive accurate promises to your customers. So it's one thing to get that generic, you'll receive something in 3 to 5 days. Much more powerful and much more impactful for your customer to say, if you order by this time, you'll get it by this time. And we're able to differentiate that offering by membership level in our Shop Your Way program, and we have found that's been very effective in driving customer and member satisfaction. Once again, a non-peak and a peak view. I use this to illustrate what adding those store nodes did for us, particularly as you can see in the middle of the country, really improving cycle time and improving velocity, and growing our one-day coverage to, quite frankly, where most of the people in the U.S. live, to provide that industry-leading service, if you will, from the store network. You can see the store network flexed by 60% to support peak. As I said, we have an ability to dynamically ramp that up or down based on what happens with seasonal volume, and it's something that is a very productive solution in the store, because we have a technology-based platform to drive an optimization, if you will, in the way store associates pick, pack, and ship product for us. So it's very important to have standard work in the store to be able to facilitate that and do it in a way that drives the right productivity at the store for picking that product. The graph here indicates how much growth have we seen in what we call our omni-channel fulfillment network between the Sears Cheetah stores, the Kmart Cheetah stores, and then Roadrunner, which is basically our store-facing DCs, which have now been enabled for online customer fulfillment. You can see we've been able to support some pretty dynamic growth, and we've been able to do that with effectively very little capital investment in the network. So this is a chance to use intelligently the network and the infrastructure you've already got and put that in best service of a customer whose needs have evolved pretty dramatically. When you think about this profile, we track that across category, and I only bring this up to highlight the fact that different categories are more cost-effective to pick in a store. Other categories are more cost-effective to pick in a DC. So we have a distributed order management layer here as we receive online orders that's able to dynamically route those orders to the most cost and service effective node in the supply chain to do that fulfillment. We look at things like order complete. How complete can I get that order from a certain node in the supply chain? How many packages will I have, and how do I minimize the number of cartons that go to the customer, both for customer experience and environmental and cost reasons? Third, we look at the cost of fulfillment. It's more cost-effective to pick in a distribution center in line, but obviously we balance that against the cycle time and logistics cost goodness of having close proximity with that store network. That distributed order management capability is key to being able to operationalize this and do it in a cost-effective way that balances both the customer's need for speed and their need for cost-effective delivery.
So as you think about where we are today and what we've been able to achieve, looking forward, I want to talk about some of what we view as the keys to the future in terms of omnichannel retail at Sears, starting again with this digitally enabled, really empowered consumer. But I don't think it's too much of a stretch to take some of these ideas and think about how they might apply across the industry for all retailers. And really these ideas are, single pile of inventory that is virtually enabled by your systems, an always-on network that's available 24/7. How do you support the final mile solution on behalf of the customer? And the birth of the COOL, which is really my acronym for Customer Order Orchestration Layer. And I'll go into each of these in a little bit more detail. So when you think about single pile of inventory, if you give the customer access to inventory wherever it is in your chain, you have the opportunity, one, to save every sale. And if you think about some of the stats where customers will abandon, 40% of the customers will abandon the cart if you're out of stock, and 47% will it depends on going to the other sites. That can be really important in terms of keeping that sale and avoiding cart abandonment. Additionally, it gives you the opportunity to have faster shipping because you may have inventory either in the store or in a traditional store support distribution center closer to that customer, obviously lowering cost to do that. And ultimately, we should be able to reduce safety stock and markdown liability when we catch up to how to manage that inventory across that single pile ultimately. Additionally, the always-on network is really the customer expectation today. So one of the things we've done at Sears is if you go to our product page, and I'm not sure you can go to another retailer that does this, we will actually provide you the shipping costs and the promise for that item while you're searching the product, not later in the cart or the checkout phase. And that really gives that guarantee that customers are looking for in terms of, I know what I can expect when I'm shopping for this product. And then as we try to optimize that transportation, are we continually routing, if it's a home delivery from a big box type solution in real time, allowing us to manage our capacity dynamically and price that capacity so that we can maximize recovery where we need it and offer the right price to the customer. Ultimately, we view 7-day-a-week delivery as being critical. We are not there yet, but it is. If we are going to have customers shopping 7 days a week, shopping on a Thursday and waiting until a Tuesday is not a 2-day promise in the real world. And then certainly the transparency in real time all the time is now a new customer expectation. And critically, you have to put the systems in place that allow you to provide that with minimal friction to the customer. The final mile is an interesting one. It gets a lot of conversation, particularly in the same-day space. And certainly 25% of customers say same day is important. However, most people won't abandon the cart until the delivery day is 8 days in the future or is undetermined, so it's not time definite. So in this space, really figuring out, can I go to 6 or 7 days a week? Should I do something like crowdsourcing? So if I want to get that faster, more time definite delivery in a local market, are there different ways to do that? Certainly no one's broken the code with more traditional courier type modes to get that density, to get a low cost, or what I call UPS ground-like rates to get there. So this is a space where we are certainly looking at different providers, and I think most people are, to see how we can enable that type of solution. That last key is the birth of the cool, and this is an area that is somewhat addressed today by distributed order management systems, but those systems are focused primarily on that sourcing. Hey, if I have inventory, where am I going to get it from? And there is some flexibility in the rule base there, but quite frankly, a tighter integration with customer care systems, promise and reservation systems, and order maintenance systems, where potentially you can give the customer the power to change that order in flight, is very, very powerful. And this system is not something that's available off the shelf today, but it is something that allows us to go beyond distributed order management to unlock a single pile of inventory, the right final mile solution in the right market, always on 24/7. I think outside of those keys that we're pursuing from a Sears Holdings standpoint, I think there's some interesting trends in technology to at least be aware of as you go out and plan your omni-channel journey. These technologies at least have the potential to be disruptive, although it's very unclear exactly how they'll be applied. But when you think about wearable technology and you think about things like Google Glass or Smart Glass, boy, this really has the opportunity as you think about, can I put assembly instructions in front of the screen, in front of the thing that I'm actually assembling and installing if I'm doing a home delivery of a washing machine or a dryer? Can I do image recognition so that I can find the right part rather than going to these, I don't have great eyesight anymore, going to these eye charts to figure out what parts you need or go through a cumbersome 20 questions to get to that piece. Can I leverage this to do store picking? If I know where product is in the store, can I geolocate that either through RFID or some other means and go right to that spot and become very, very efficient within the store for store picking? So wearable technology, at least from a fulfillment side, I think has a lot of interesting applications, as does 3D printing. Is this a technology that can change parts? Parts is very expensive because it's low volume, high fulfillment cost, and very unpredictable. If you could not have that finished inventory and could create that, boy, you could take out a lot of liability in your supply chain by doing that. Plus, you can do product customization for the final pieces, whether that's potentially a case for a iPhone. You could instead of guessing what customers are going to buy, you could finish it close to the demand. I think equally as interesting is the Internet of Things. One of the ways Sears is going after this is through the connected home, right? Communicating machine to machine, but also communicating with smart devices. So if I want to have a connected thermostat, or I want to see my energy consumption, or I want to control my air conditioner, I can connect these things. But interestingly, if I also have that same technology in my washers and dryers, can I predict when something's going to fail and when there's going to be a demand for something, or when a piece of equipment needs to be replaced? Or can I personalize based on gathering these data from machine-to-machine communications? Further, can I use predictive analytics to bring to bear that for, one, better forecasting for us from an inventory standpoint, for personalization, or managing end of life in terms of what we have in our supply chain, and how can I best get that to the customers who might want it? There's also, I really love the conversations around driverless technology. Certainly drones has gotten the lion's share of the press, but the Google Smart Car, I think, is also very interesting. I have highlighted there catapults. That was actually a little bit of a joke because Groupon did a little commercial about how they were going to deliver using catapults in response to the drones, and I thought that was quite amusing. But when you think about this, this technology actually works. Now, there's a lot of legal and legal things to resolve there, but certainly the technology is not that far away. And then how do we use things like crowdsourcing? So this is data behind the scenes to optimize things. Crowdsourcing has very much the potential to be an inexpensive way to deliver that final mile. it certainly opens up delivery windows to be beyond the traditional in the morning to dinner time or slightly after dinner. And it has the ability to level to demand. If the demand's not there, you're not really wasting that excess capacity. That pays out in terms of somebody's time, not in terms of an underutilized vehicle or driver. So, what does all this mean? We talked about where we are. We talked about our keys to success as we see them, and talked about some of the potentially disruptive technologies that I think we need to keep our eye on. So now's the fun part where I'm going to make a couple predictions about the future. The first is, I believe the smartphone technology linked to the cloud is going to become the epicenter of people's lives. That's going to refer to how they socialize and plan events with friends and family, how they manage their home in terms of even things as minute as preventive maintenance of their lawnmower might be managed through a smartphone and some software technology with the cloud. How they manage their health when they need checkups. Think about Fitbit as an example and how that could tie into broader information in the cloud. How they consume products, how they schedule their lives, even how they do banking. In fact, the lines are going to blur between social, retail, and these other parts of their lives. And retailers are going to need to adapt to that to become part of that system and not become separate from that system. And within that system, I think customers will be enabled to choose from different fulfillment options. Not just, hey, if I order something online, it's going to get delivered to my house, but potentially, if I order online, it can get delivered to my office because I don't even want to, I don't have a place where you can deliver that, or I don't want it delivered to my home. Or I can deliver it to a remote location. This could be a kiosk at a subway station, or it could be another store. But certainly for nearly all purchases, those options are going to be available, and they'll all find their level in terms of the balance that gets used. I think you're going to find ship from store, that we talked quite a bit about here, is going to be the standard operating procedure for all retailers. There is no other way for this to go. And retailers are going to pick and fulfill orders 7 days a week. I think this notion of no Saturdays and no Sundays within a couple years is going to go away. And we're going to find that when we think about store fulfillment and that final mile and maybe fulfilling from places very close to the customer, we're going to find stores specifically leveraging DC-like tools, warehouse management system, wearable tech, and adopting best practices that you see in warehouses in stores to make that fulfillment happen. I don't think you're going to see driverless technology, drones and catapults, and driverless cars be prominent. I think there's just too much to overcome in the public sector to make that happen. But I do think there's some global applications where we'll find that to be the case, but less so in the U.S. I think you're going to find crowdsourcing, so taking the Uber model for passengers and applying it to things very much like Deliv and other folks do. That will be part of the final mile solution for many retailers, but it's going to find its level. I'm very concerned that at scale it's going to be able to provide the same type of efficiencies that more traditional means might offer. And then regarding the sort of the big question of same day, I think it's going to be a standard offering across the board, but I think it's ultimately going to be a small percentage of the balance of sale because how often do you need, across the broad spectrum of products offered by retail, you actually need something same day and be willing to pay for it?
Okay, so when we think about the material that we've covered today, what are the implications for your business? What are the takeaways? And so we've tried to summarize that here on the final slide. First of all, as Jeff mentioned in the introduction, OmniChannel is not a new channel or a new path of retail. It is the evolution of retail. So it's not a matter of, are you going to play? It's a matter of you're going to need to play to be relevant in the marketplace going forward. As you think about transformation, this notion of any to any is critical. You've got to think about a single pool of inventory that can be fulfilled from anywhere to any customer in any way that they want to see it. So back to this notion of fulfilling orders based on what your customer wants and based on the ultimate convenience factor for them, not maybe what you've done traditionally. Finally, technology is going to be key. So technology isn't a substitute for poor business process, but it's going to be critical for you to have the technology that allows you to have transparency to inventory across your supply chain, and then allows you to drop orders into the appropriate part of the supply chain to fulfill those customer orders, both with the efficiency and the cycle time that your customers demand. When I think about supply chain as a function, I talked before about change management and how the entire organization really needs to align and orient around this strategy. We talk about a notion here of boundaryless leadership, meaning we have to all be stewards of what our customers want and need, and really be advocates for that customer experience, regardless of the operational function you may be in the organization. So this notion of boundaryless leadership is critical, and everybody in the organization needs to be aligned on the critical priorities to satisfy your customer needs cost effectively. Finally, there's a shortage of talent. Every organization has it. We've got to find a team of folks and continue to develop, recruit, and retain a group of people who have hard analytical skills, but also who can move very quickly and try new things and actually experiment to bring new functionality and evolve that customer experience. So it's a data-driven exercise. It's not something you can do, maybe with some of the traditional management techniques, but you've really got to be able to manage the business, be able to understand those numbers, and then be able to turn that into an action plan that may involve other functions outside of supply chain very quickly. So lots of change. There's probably never been a more exciting time to be involved in retail. Competitors now come from everywhere. When I think about traditional retailers being able to disrupt traditional players very quickly, but quite frankly, the raising the bar and raising the level of game makes this industry even more important and more fun to be involved with than ever before. That concludes our formal presentation. Mike, we'll turn things back to you.
Oh, outstanding job, Bill and Jeff. You guys just absolutely did a wonderful job of setting the table for what we're about to learn in this year's virtual conference. I'm just going to go back, and I'm going to keep this implications page up. Guys, we do have just a few minutes here for a few questions, and there are questions rolling in from the crowd. There are a number of questions here kind of bunched together in some similar types of themes in the questions. So we do have time for a couple. I just want to let everybody know that if you are submitting questions, and if we unfortunately don't get to your question today, all these questions are going to be packaged up and sent off to Jeff and Bill, and they'll be able to shoot you a quick email with their answers. Guys, one of the questions I think, and I can get a feel for a lot of the folks in the audience here, obviously e-tailing and the pressure to implement an omni-channel strategy, just like you guys spelled out today, is only growing, right? And there are many in the audience, from what I can tell here from the level of questions, who are just getting their arms around the concept. They've either taken some steps, or they're just, and they're maybe hitting some walls, or some folks are just basically understanding now they got to make some moves. Now, for those folks who are just getting ready to take that leap, what were some of the earliest considerations, or some of the advice you have for earliest considerations that they need to keep in mind when they're starting out on this omni-channel journey, I believe as Jeff called it? I believe you mentioned some of those steps as early priorities, guys. What are some of those things you need to have in line, or what do you have to understand? What are some of those first steps that maybe you can share with some of the folks out there who are just trying to get their arms around this concept?
Yeah, so for us, the real key at the end of the day is who's going to pony up the resources, whether that's people's time or dollars. So really, step one, making sure that we were all clear on the mission. And Bill covered some of those slides about what we were looking at in 2011 and what we wanted to do on behalf of our customer via our mission statement. So there was a lot of top-level alignment that was required to drive that. And through that top-level alignment, one of the techniques we used is we built a cross-functional team that had dedicated people from each of those key areas on the team that I was driving to establish this and allow us to do this very, very quickly. Had we not been able to have access to those resources to get done, we'd be still talking about what we want to do versus what we were able to do.
Yep.
Yeah,
Sounds like I'm sure. I'm sorry, Bill.
Yeah, no, I was going to say the alignment thing too. Just underscoring the point Jeff made, Mike, is key. Making this a we thing. This isn't an online or an e-commerce initiative. This is very much a core to a business model evolution. So to Jeff's point, having dedicated resources, but also having resources that are accountable and able to make decisions across the organization quickly is really critical to success in being able to move the needle quickly.
That's a great point.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Bill. Terrific point.
I was just going to add that the level of these dedicated resources we have, just to be clear, was at senior director and vice president level, versus some analysts and managers. So they were empowered to make decisions very quickly on behalf of their respective organizations.
Absolutely. And guys, I just popped up that integrated retail team slide that you showed a little bit earlier in the presentation. It really is across the board, and it has to be a we type of initiative. That's just great advice. A couple questions, and I figured we have a number of questions coming in here about the ship from store concept, and I know a lot of folks are trying to grapple with that now. Stores operating as DCs, fulfillment hubs for that next day. Obviously, that makes a heck of a lot of sense. I believe your team calls it the Cheetah Network. What was the biggest challenge there in transforming the store into that very critical role?
Well, Bill covered it on one of the slides. There was a lot of consternation around should the store get credit for the sale, and
right.
We ultimately said if they're going to bear the cost, they're going to bear the credit for the sale. And I think that has paid us a tremendous amount of dividends, because now the things that will incent the store and our priorities are now aligned for those stores to be successful. Mm-hmm. So a couple of things. If you look at traditional store execution, shelf integrity, inventory integrity, and the steps to operate a store, to do .com fulfillment and achieve the levels of service that we now provide, the stores actually had to step up a level. And it's interesting, when you look at the economics at the store level, the P&L is a positive impact to have the sales and the cost at the store. So if the store is not performing, I have the opportunity to go to the store, a few miles down the road and make them the Cheetah store versus these guys. So now, stores will compete to be the Cheetah store in a certain market, because they want to be successful. And that really speaks volumes for how aligned they are to the mission of fulfillment from a store.
Mm-hmm. A couple questions, guys, came in, and we're going to have to actually wrap up with this question. It's more of a transportation management question, which is obviously such a major cog in this very, very big wheel. Guys, sitting at the table with existing carriers to rework relationships is so important to meeting the omni-channel challenge, as we all know. Can you share some of the steps that you took to grow that UPS relationship in that 2-day, I believe, network that you set up, Jeff? Obviously, a great existing relationship there with the carrier, but I'm sure you had to really sit down and take it to the next level. Some of the steps or some takeaways there on how you can do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Really, we've had a long-standing partnership with UPS, but bringing them into the fold and being very clear about what our mission was and what we were trying to achieve allowed them not only to work with us on potentially different tariff structures or different service level offerings. So as an example, we had to create scheduled pickups from UPS versus, hey, just have the brown truck come by when we're ready, because
right.
we're shipping 200 and 300 packages. So there's a whole operational component to how to execute that in the local market and do it in a cost-effective way. But certainly, as we did the analytics of what would be the network cost of actually executing against this, and we had a number of different models. We didn't pick one and go with it, but bringing them into the fold in terms of what we were trying to achieve allowed us to harness their analytical power, and they actually came to us with different solution ideas in terms of how we could actually execute against this, and that was very powerful for us.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, Mike, one last point there, I think, on the transportation component, because it's such a dynamic part of the solution. I think as we look at regional parcel carriers, as we look at some of the changes in the USPS philosophy around the involvement the Postal Service wants to play, particularly in weekend package delivery,
sure.
That's just a part of the business that you've always got to have your finger on to be able to understand how to take advantage of that. changes in cube rules, changes in
Yep.
Tariff structures and service levels really force you to understand what's going on in each one of those transportation sub-modes, if you will, to make sure you can really optimize both the cost and service experience for your customers.
Absolutely, absolutely. Bill and Jeff, you guys touched on probably just about every single session that's taking part now as part of our virtual conference today. You guys took it at a beautiful high level and really rolled it into how Sears Holdings is and been able to apply all of these strategies. And guys, just a wonderful job setting the table today. Again, I want to remind everybody we have a number of questions still rolling in, so we're going to wrap up all those questions, send them off to Bill and Jeff. But unfortunately, guys, we do have to wrap up. We probably could go on for another hour, and the questions keep rolling in. But Bill and Jeff, guys, just a wonderful job today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to help us set the table. Really appreciate it today.
Anytime, Mike. Glad to help.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Great, guys, outstanding job, and I want to let everybody know who's attending. Please, now it's time to move on to the rest of the sessions of this year's virtual conference. Please enjoy. Take care.